I've talked before about Manchester United's transfer strategy and how they seem to buy players who are kind of coming towards the end of their career who don't have a lot left to offer. And oftentimes that kind of strategy will sort of dampen the potential of some young players that they have coming through the youth system, trying to make the transition into the first team, and who never quite get to the heights that they should have done, potentially because Manchester United will buy these sort of getting towards the end of their career players, put them on stupid amounts of money, then they can't justify dropping those players, so that the players who would develop if they had the game time don't develop because they don't get that game time and that experience. And one of the things about Manchester United, of previous Manchester United, particularly under Alex Ferguson, was that there was always kind of a blend of experienced players and younger players. And typically, the idea behind this was that you would have the legs in the young players and then the experience to kind of guide those legs with sort of more experienced players, such as Rio Ferdinand, who was playing in the final Premier League winning team under Alex Ferguson, who was 35 years old. And he was playing alongside sort of Chris Smalling and Phil Jones, etc., who were in their early 20s at the time. And to illustrate this, let's just go through the Manchester United versus Arsenal 2012-13 starting 11 team. So in goal, there was David De Gea, who was 23 at the time. We had Everett at left back at 31 years old. Johnny Evans, who was 24. And then alongside him was Rio Ferdinand at 34. And then on the right-hand side was Raphael, who was 22. Going into midfield, there was Ashley Young, who was 27, and Carrick in midfield, who was 31, alongside Tom Cleverley, who was 23. And then on the right-hand side was Antonio Valencia, who was 27. And then the two forwards were Rooney, sort of playing in a deep-lying forward role, aged 27, and Van Persie, who was 29, playing in the striker role. And the average age of this team was 27 years old. And something that I'm going to come back to as well is that in that game, if Rio Ferdinand had not played and Phil Jones had played instead, who was 20 years old, the average age of that team would have been 25.8 years. So we've got a fairly decent mix there of experienced players and young players. And with that in mind, I want to go through the team that Manchester United could field in 24-25 with that in mind, trying to blend experience with youth. And having experience in key positions, that's where it's important, is that you can have sort of a Tom Cleverley in midfield at 23 years old if he's playing alongside the experienced Michael Carrick. Michael Carrick in that situation can guide him, can tell him where he needs to be, etc. The same with playing Johnny Evans, who was 24, alongside Rio Ferdinand. Rio Ferdinand can tell him where he needs to be positionally. He can bark orders at Evans, press, be direct, whatever it might well be. And the same with having Raphael on that right hand side. Ferdinand is there to tell him where he needs to be. Valencia is in front of Raphael. He can cover up Raphael's potential mistakes. And having a blend of experience and youth in a back four helps David De Gea because they have both the legs and the experience to help him out. So let's take a look at the team that, and I'm talking about what I would do. I'm not talking about what Erik ten Hag will do. I'm not talking about what a potential new manager would do. I'm talking about what I would do. Okay, so let's get into the team, and I've set them up in a standard sort of 4-2-3-1 formation. And I'm not going to go into any kind of tactical detail or anything like that. I'm just going to show you what could be possible. So let's take a look at the goalkeeper. I know, you'd be shocked, wouldn't you? I have put David De Gea in goal. And look, I know that David De Gea is not at Manchester United right now. But if I was Manchester United, and like I said, this is my team, I would go to David De Gea and I would beg the guy, beg him to come back. I would beg and plead, and I would sorry and apologise until I was blue in the face. I would give him the money that he was on before, not that new contract that he signed and then they tore up and threw it in the bin. I would give him the money that he was on before, and I would beg him to stay. Because look, Onana hasn't worked. Onana has shown that with regard to him, his distribution, it's not that good. And with regard to him doing the very basics of goalkeeping, i.e. keeping the goal, he's awful. And David De Gea, look, David De Gea at some point in his career was the best goalkeeper in the world. He was clearly world class for a large portion of his career. He still is world class. And the reality is that David De Gea stayed at Manchester United when Manchester United were awful. Awful, awful, awful. Season after season after season, they underperformed and under-delivered. And the one constant in that team for all those years was David De Gea. David De Gea turned potential losses into draws, potential draws into wins. This guy, with regard to his goalkeeping abilities, he's one of the best that the Premier League has ever seen. Ever. And with regard to sort of ranking Manchester United goalkeepers, he's the third best goalkeeper that Manchester United has ever had. And he's still relatively young for a goalkeeper, 33 years old at this point. And going into next season, he will still be 33 years old. You could get another 3, maybe 4 good years off of him. And the argument against keeping David De Gea was that his distribution is poor. But Manchester United at this time, you don't have that as a potentiality. You don't have the players to be able to play that way. You can't operate on this Ajax system. You operate on a system where you should be playing the ball long and hoping for the second ball. That's what Manchester United should be doing. That's what they should be doing for success. And one of the reasons that they should be doing that for success is because this team, and this is the only tactical detail that I'll probably give, is that this team is not going to be a team that keeps the ball and has possession. This team is a counter-attacking team because that's the best that Manchester United could be. And that is what Manchester United built their success upon. Manchester United were never a team that played beautiful football. Manchester United were a team who could get the ball up the pitch very, very quickly and hurt teams on the counter-attack with pace. But not only that, but they were a team who were capable of slow build-up play when required. Not all of the time, like a Barcelona used to do, like the beautiful Ajax teams used to do. These Manchester United were a ruthless and tough team who weren't known for dominating possession and passing the ball about. They were known for hitting teams on a counter-attack and slow build-up play when required. And that's what this team is going to be. So David De Gea is in goal because we're not going to try to keep the ball like Manchester City does. We're not that team. Let's not pretend that we are. Let's not pretend that they ever were. Let's pretend that we are Manchester United and we have watched 15 years, 20 years, 25 years of Alex Ferguson setting up his team to hurt teams on the counter-attack. That's what we are. So David De Gea is my goalkeeper, and like I said, you're going to have to go and beg that guy to come back, because the reality is you're not getting anything better than him at this moment in time. So let's go and grab David De Gea. Let's move on to the defence. I have Luke Shaw at left back. Luke Shaw is one of the best left backs in the country at the moment, and there's no reason to sort of change that. There aren't many transfers in this list. I think I have one transfer in this list on this team. I have assumed that maybe there's talks of this player coming in. There have been talks of this one player coming in for the last few months. I think it's probably likely that he will come in either this summer or next summer, but we're going to see on that. But I think there's only one player additional to what's already available other than David De Gea in the squad. So Luke Shaw at left back, and then Martinez at left centre back, and then I've got Varane/Todibo. It is likely that Todibo comes in from Lyon. I think that if Lyon get Champions League football for next season, that they'll probably push that transfer back by a year. But I think that he does probably come in at some point. But regardless of that, Manchester United need a centre-back because of the sort of injury issues that Varane and Martinez have over the course of their playing history. So a good centre-back pair in there, and obviously they need coverage because of those injury issues. I think that Manchester United, they probably should keep Maguire, but never to play him as sort of a guaranteed starter, as a squad player, somebody who can come off the bench, somebody who could fill in for an injury for a few games, a player that you could play in cup competitions, but not as a starter. At right back, I have Wan-Bissaka. He's probably the best 1v1 right back in the league, in the country. I don't really see any issues with keeping Wan-Bissaka at the club in the starting lineup. He's pretty solid at right back. He's having a off season currently, but I think all players are entitled to have an off season once in a while, and unfortunately, we're seeing Wan-Bissaka's at present. So moving on to the central defensive midfield pair, and I'm looking at Casemiro and Manu/Diallo. And Casemiro, look, he's one of the best centre defensive midfielders of his generation. He's 31, or he will be 31 when he comes into this season. But the reality is that I think he's probably got something to offer for the next maybe 2 or 3 years. Obviously reducing his playtime over the course of that time. But in that time, you could have him really engage in the development of Kobbie Mainoo, who I think over the course of the next 5, maybe 10 years, he could develop into a very good player. He could be at Manchester United for his whole career as a really good servant for them. I've been quite impressed with his performances in the games that he's played this season. I think that he's been one of the only sort of bright lights that Manchester United have had this season. And I think that you could, over the course of the next couple of seasons, you could gradually reduce Casemiro's playtime and gradually increase Kobbie Mainoo's playtime so that Kobe Manu takes over the main responsibility of that role, and playing alongside Casemiro, sort of a 50-50 share of that sort of position with Diallo. He would gain the experience to be a very, very good player, in my opinion. Diallo alongside Casemiro in that 50-50 role with Manu. Diallo, I know that people will think of him as a winger, but he's been utilised as a number 8 quite a lot at the youth development level and in the periods of time when he's been out on loan. And look, he seems to be a very talented 8. He's a very good ball carrier. He's a good technical player. He makes those late runs into the box. And if you were to, again, he could develop that positional awareness, which he already has, but he could continue to develop that playing alongside Casemiro. I think that what you would likely do is play sort of Diallo alongside Casemiro when you're playing sort of teams that you expect to be a bit less expensive in their play, teams that you expect will kind of sit back in a low block, and that will allow Diallo to sort of carry the ball a bit more and sort of play out that role a bit more to its fullest extent. And then Manu, you would give them more difficult games when you need sort of 2 defensively minded central defensive midfielders. You could play a Manu and Casemiro, for example, when they play Manchester City or Liverpool or Arsenal, when you expect that you're going to be a bit more under the cosh and a bit more under pressure. So giving them sort of that 50-50 split early on, and then sort of giving them more responsibilities going on into the future, so that eventually sort of you remove Casemiro from that team altogether and you have sort of Manu and Diallo starting alongside each other. So that's the central defensive pair. Let's move into the attacking players. Attacking midfield role, I have Bruno Fernandes. I think that Bruno Fernandes is a world-class player when he plays in a team that counter-attacks. I think that if you have Bruno Fernandes in a team that plays in any other way but counter-attacking, he's largely ineffective. I remember when he came in his first season under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, playing sort of a midfield 3 of Fred and Pogba and Bruno Fernandes. And Bruno Fernandes was very effective. And the reason that he was effective was because sort of the ball would come out, Paul Pogba would find him, and then he would go and create sort of the second ball, getting the assist, playing it through for maybe a Cavani to score through, or another Rashford to score through. He's a very good player when it comes to finding the final ball when there is space to operate in a counter-attacking situation. But in a sort of possession-based team or any other kind of team, he's largely ineffective. And I'm not sure why that is. But if you want to get the best of Bruno Fernandes, he's currently in his prime at 29 years old, you have to play counter-attacking football. And that's one of the reasons why I would say that this team would be a counter-attacking team rather than a possession-based team, as well as, obviously, they don't have the players to play possession-based football. On the left wing, and you'll notice there's no Rashford in this team. Where's Rashford? Well, I would sell Rashford. I would get rid of him. I think that Rashford, because I remember Rashford's debut under Louis van Gaal, and I look at that Rashford, I think he was 18 years old at the time, and the Rashford of today, and there is no difference between those two players. There's been no development since he was 18 years old. He's no better than he was when he was 18 years old. And sure, you might say, well, for a couple of seasons he's scored more goals than when he was 18 years old. But the reality is that the reason that he didn't score those goals when he was 18 years old was because Number one, he wasn't the main man on the pitch back then. And number two, he gets more playtime. That's it. That's the difference. But the reality is that playing on that left wing, what does he do? Skip inside on his right foot and try to stick it in the opposite corner. That's what he's done his whole career. He hasn't developed into sort of a more sort of consistent striker of the ball. He doesn't score any more goals in different ways than he did when he was 18 years old. He really has not developed into anything else. His passing's not improved. You know, his creativity's not improved. His shot placement's not improved. His shot power's not improved. His heading's not improved. He's the same player he was when he was 18. And look, I'm not sure exactly how old he is at this point, but from that stage to now, you would expect that people would start to make progress. There are players that I have picked who have improved since that time. And David De Gea, for example, is a better goalkeeper now than he was 10 years ago. Luke Shaw is a better left back now than he was 10 years ago. Wan-Bissaka is a better right back now than he was 10 years ago, you know? And Wan-Bissaka 10 years ago was 16. And Rashford 10 years ago, he was probably around the same age, maybe a bit older. But the reality is that there's been no improvement for Rashford. And you keep re-signing him to these contracts, probably because he sells shirts. But he's nothing special. Marcus Rashford is not a special player. You know, Manchester United fans favour Marcus Rashford quite a lot. And I understand why they favour him quite a lot. He's one of Manchester United's better players. But that just shows you how far that Manchester United have fallen rather than how good Marcus Rashford is. The reality of Marcus Rashford is, I'm going to say something which might seem controversial to you when you first hear it, but the reality is, and you'll agree with this, I guarantee you'll agree with this when you think about it, instead of letting it touch your emotions, think with your brain. Marcus Rashford is a worse player than Antonio Valencia was. Think about that. Antonio Valencia was not a special player at all. Antonio Valencia was quick. He could get the ball in the box, which Marcus Rashford doesn't do, but he could get the ball in the box, and he was damn hard working. Which Marcus Rashford is not. So, of those three attributes that Antonio Valencia he stood out a bit. The only thing that Marcus Rashford has that Antonio Valencia had was pace. That's it. That's Marcus Rashford. He's a shit version of Antonio Valencia. If you were to bring Antonio Valencia back, that 2012-13 squad that I showed earlier, when he was 27, bring that Antonio Valencia player back and put him in this squad, he's one of the best players there. He might be the best player there. That's how poor this Manchester United squad is. That's how poor Marcus Rashford is. But we look at him now as a great player, or a good player, relatively good player, because all of the players at Manchester United are steps down, levels below the Manchester United squad that Antonio Valencia played in and was not considered particularly good in any shape or form. They had much better players in that team. Robin Van Persie was a better player. Rooney was a better player. Michael Carrick was a better player. Rio Ferdinand in his pomp was a better player. Evra was a better player. You know, so there's 3 or 4, maybe 5 players in that Manchester United team that Valencia played in that were better than Valencia. But because Rashford is one of the 5 players that we would consider of the best at Manchester United, in our minds it kind of raises him up higher than he actually is. Marcus Rashford isn't that good. Get rid of him. So I've gone with Garnacho. Garnacho, in my opinion, in 10 years' time, will be the best player in the world. There's no doubt in my mind. unless he gets some sort of major injury, which prevents him from being able to run, like a Michael Owen hamstring tear or something like that. Or maybe he gets a terrible cruciate injury that he never overcomes. Unless he gets some freak injury, Garnacho in 10 years' time will be the best player in the world. He reminds me so much of young Ronaldo. And one of the issues that young Ronaldo had that he had to overcome was that when he got down that byline, he didn't pick his head up. And Garnacho has that same issue, is that he's very good on the ball. He can get past the player. When he plays the ball into the box, he's capable of playing a good cross. He's capable of a good pass. He's capable of occupying one or two players at the same time. But he just needs to learn to pick his head up, and then the assists will come. And when the assists start coming, he'll start getting a hunger for really scoring goals. And we're looking at a player, by the time he's maybe 22 or 23, he could be getting, he could be getting 20 goals a season regularly. And then he'll start setting targets for himself. Okay, I want to do 25, then I want to do 30, then I want to do 35, etc., just like Cristiano Ronaldo. And I think that his natural ability at the moment, with hard work, and if Manchester United can put themselves in a position where they're capable of bringing players onto the next level, which means investing in Carrington, investing in coaching staff, etc. In 10 years' time, he'll be the best player in the world. I don't think he'll be at Manchester United for that. He'll probably go off to a Real Madrid, or he'll probably follow his hero off to Real Madrid and have a really good career. But up until he's probably 25 or 26, Manchester United have a real player there to be developed into something really, really special. And it's up to Manchester United not to cock it up. On the right-hand side, I've gone with Pellistri. Agile player, can go past the player, can get the ball into the box. At this point, I haven't seen anything that makes me think that he'll be a top player. You never know, though. Players can, I don't think people thought that Van Persie would be a top player, and then out of nowhere he kind of was. Pellistri could be capable of that, but we'll have to see. But I think he has more than enough to play on that right-hand side, to be developed into something decent, whether that's a decent utility player who sort of is good enough going forwards and good enough coming backwards, or potentially something special like a Garnacho in the future. But we'll have to see with that. The jury's still out on it. But I would pick him at this point over Anthony, who I think is just an awful signing. And Sancho, we don't know what's going to happen with that. And I'm basically trying to go off of what I think is most realistic. And I think that there's no harm in giving a player a chance. Some players, you say to them, you're going to be my starter next season, and they collapse under the weight of the pressure. And some players, they rise to the challenge. And I think, let's give Pellistri a go, see what he does with it. Okay, let's have a look at the striker. I know, shocking, isn't it? I picked the best forward that Manchester United have got to play up front. I don't think that's shocking, but people will be shocked because of what the media has represented him as, the allegations that have been made against him, all of which have been dropped, by the way. There was evidence that the police uncovered that suggested that the allegations that the other women made against him, not his current partner, but the other women made against him, were completely false. Obviously, the woman, his partner, made allegations against him, and she's still with him. So either it was not as big a deal as it was. Obviously, if you're able to recoup a relationship together, then like I wouldn't be with somebody who beat me up. So maybe it was kind of made out to be a bit more than it was, or whatever the case may be. It doesn't look like those charges are going to stick. And I don't think that you can punish somebody for allegations that have been made against them when there's very little evidence. There's sort of no motivation to pursue charges any further. And I think, look, bring the guy back to the club, because for two reasons. He's the best that you've got. And he could help to develop Erasmus Højlund if that's where you want to go in maybe 2 or 3 years' time. You could do sort of split responsibilities between the two if that's what you wanted to do. But he's your best forward. And I think that you're cutting your nose off to spite your face because his name appeared in the newspapers. And with allegations which were obviously not particularly good or favourable to either him or the club. But those allegations are dead. So move on. I'm sure that other people, that the public won't just let it go like that. I'm sure that there'll be people in the comment section going, "You bastard, you hate him. You bastard, you like him. He beat you up." I don't know what happened. I wasn't there. You don't know either. So let's not pretend like we do. I would bring him back because he's the best that you've got. The second reason that I would bring him back is because his next move from the club that he's at now, if they buy him, is to Real Madrid. I don't think he stays at Getafe. I think that if they buy him, which they'll probably get him on a very, very small fee, and he'll probably get his wages paid off by Manchester United. What will happen is that he'll probably be at Getafe for maybe 1 season, and then Real Madrid will buy him. And as Manchester United, you've lost out. You've lost out not just on a really talented player, but on the transfer fee that you could command for him from a Real Madrid, or maybe a Barcelona, or maybe a Bayern. A top team is going to come in for this guy, and you're just going to cut your nose off to spite your face because of allegations, rumour and innuendo that have turned out to be dropped, some of them falsified. Why would you do that? And look, people will be angry about it, probably, but that anger will die down after maybe 2 or 3 weeks. The news will stop printing the stories, the paparazzi will stop following him around, and it'll be swept under the carpet. So why not just go through that? So that you can have a really talented striker, which you're lacking. You desperately need him, and you're talking about bringing in a Timo Werner as a bit of backup for Rasmus Højlund, who's been a failure so far. Could be something decent in the future. The jury's out and we'll see. But you're just going to cut your nose off to spite your face. For nothing. For 2 weeks of maybe aggravation by the media. And that's just stupidity. And for a guy who we don't know what happened, and in this country, we like to talk about how you're innocent until you're proven guilty. But we don't act like that. And we haven't acted like that in this situation. So, for me, the obvious choice is Mason Greenwood. And I've put the average age in there of 25 to 26, because there are some young players in there, I'll admit that is true. But the average age is not so different from the average age of that 2012-13 lineup that I showed earlier. That's what I would go with for Manchester United in 24-25. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I've said some things. I know I said some things. Um, but yeah, let me know what you think about those things in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and have a great day.